We're kind of in a weird spot right now for the meta of Pokemon Pocket, whereas there's like 3 decks that counter each other and they're everywhere in the ranked ladder. Hey guys, Zen here. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the top 5 decks you're probably going to see in the ranked ladder, and it just so happens that the deck lists that I'm going to be sharing with you in today's video are all first place winning deck lists for these top 5 decks that you're probably going to see. Starting off with Sung Day, the first place winner in our own tournament here on the channel, the Xatumi Econ Cup, number 5. It was actually the first week of Secluded Springs, and they brought what I believe is the best deck in the format. But before I show you the deck, you guys, let me show you the matchups, because this is what's really important. It does good into almost everything, but I don't need to tell you guys that. I'm sure if you played any amount of ranked this season, you've gone up against a variation of this deck list, and it just does well into almost everything. Here is the first place winning deck list. Now, you will probably see some variations with Mantike, and again, I just want to preface this by saying these decks are not the only decks you can play. These are the first place winning deck lists this past week. However, if you want to spice it up, by all means. With that being said, it is so hard to go up against this because, quite honestly, Greninja just feels super oppressive. Once you get your Greninja online, you just snipe, you can Cyrus them and knock them out with your Suicune or any of your Pokemon, all while also generating energy for your Giratina in the back. Oftentimes when I play this deck, even if I start Froakie, I get that energy on Froakie and I retreat into my Suicune because that legendary pulse is just so strong to help me dig into my deck and find the cards I need. The rare candies, the capes, the double Iridas. Yeah, this thing is honestly one of the best decks, I think, in the meta. I actually play this. I enjoy playing this because I do feel it is tactful. However, I can understand how it's a little bit overtuned right now, especially in the current meta, which is why we're going to go right into its potential counter. But before we continue, if you guys are liking this type of video, don't forget to like and then hype the video. That is a new feature here on YouTube that can really help this channel out and the community. So I really appreciate it. And also maybe check if you're subscribed to the channel. Now, yeah, that's Dark Tina. This is a first place winning deck list by How Poke or Poke. I'm not entirely sure. They won 11 times and they got 1 tie. And if you look at their matchups, that is a ton of Suicune Greninja matchups, and even that Giratina right there, where they just end up on top. So Darkrai Giratina is still a thing, and that is a good thing to have in this meta. You don't just want Suicune, a Greninja, to just be unstoppable, right? However, the thing that can beat them is also the most unstoppable deck in the meta. However, there is a deck that can also counter the Darkrai Giratina, but we'll get into that one after this. Like I said, it's a little trifecta of decks, and here is that winning deck list. It's very standard. You have the double Giratina, double Darkrai's, and then it's a slew of trainer cards. That's it. A Guzma, Professor Pokemon Center Lady, I always call Nurse Joy. Sometimes I've seen 2 copies of that. 1 red, 1 Cyrus, a little bit of everything. So that way you have to really decide when you want to use your supporter cards, because if you use them too early, you just lost all the value you could have had from waiting potentially and using it when you really needed to use those supporter cards. So that's why I feel like this is a very high skill deck. A lot of players can play Darkrai Giratina, but not as good as the ones that have like over 100, close to 1,000 matches where they know exactly when to use their supporter cards to win those games. Sabrina, Mars, a red card, a potion, 2 Rocky helmets, which I think is very important in this deck because your guys, they're going to charge up. They need a few turns, a minimum of 3, especially if you're going second, to get your Darkrai online. So having something like Rocky Helmet to chip damage if your opponent decides to attack you is going to be very helpful for you, as well as that cape. Now, like I promised, what counters Darkrai Giratina? And that is the first place winning deck list by M4 Kia _T. They got 12 1-1, 1 tie and 1 loss. The loss is to Buzzwole, but like no one's playing Buzzwole anymore. So maybe people will start playing Buzzwole, but yeah, but check out this matchup right now. They do fairly well to a couple Suicunes, but also Darkrai Giratinas kind of get stopped by this because of the Oricorio. Now, with that being said, the reason I say it's a trifecta is because Darkrai beats Suicune Greninja. Suicune Greninja can beat this deck, the Oricorio, because you can just snipe the Oricorio, bring it in, and You can't really do much about it with your Greninja. Hits them for 80 in a turn, right? And then you have your Greninja Oricorio deck that can counter into the Darkrai. So let's check out the actual deck list real quick. And it's literally the Suicune deck list, but without Suicune. Instead of Suicune, you have Oricorio, which stops EXs. You still have your double Cyrus. It's the exact same strategy. However, it's up to you if you're running both lightning and water energy. More often than not, I do see dual energy run in this deck, but maybe sometimes you don't. Maybe you just run water energy and you don't let your Oricorio attack. Maybe even just water and psychic, or potentially even all three. Unfortunately, it doesn't show us what the energy was chosen for this deck, but it does show us exactly what this deck is trying to do, and that is to snipe, bring them in, and have either Oricorio just say, hey, you can't hit us, or Giratina one-shot them. So yeah, that's pretty much a Giratina meta. All three, top three decks currently in the meta that can counter each other all have Giratina EX, which is honestly kind of funny. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, but I can see how it's going to be pretty boring over time, especially. But with that being said, this is just ranked and this is just the tournaments. Guys, we have a ton of cards in Pokemon Pocket. Please, there is nothing wrong with playing a spicy Infernape deck and taking it into casuals and having fun. Like, just have fun with the game if that's what you're going for. Don't feel like you have to play these meta decks in order to feel like you're good at the game. I just needed to say that, not to take anything away from these first place winners. They are phenomenal, and we still have two more decks to talk about. And it is Espeon Sylveon. It does fairly well into almost everything. Shout out to Day. They got first place in the Super Bicho Weekly Cup Limitless Proof, and their deck list is exactly what you'd expect. The only thing that I find weird here is there's only one Eevee bag, but you have the Sylveon, the Espeon to help you counter Oricorios, and just Sylveon EX being able to draw into your Espeon EX that you can just pivot in and out of and heal is just so strong. I think if I could be completely honest, I think the top three decks that, if we're not including all of the Giratina decks, would be Suicune Giratina, it would be this Espeon Eevee box Sylveon, and the next deck that I'm going to be sharing with you guys. And that is the Silvally Arceus deck from the Umbreon League. I think this is the most recent one, and they got 8-1-1. They only lost once with into almost a similar matchup, if you think about it, in Oricorio Silvally, but then they also beat another one. So it could have just been very unlucky draws, or maybe the opponent was just doing amazing things, right? However, if you look at the rest of this, Darkrai Giratinas, Suicune Greninjas, and we also have right here the Oricorio Greninja that they end up beating and winning the entire tournament. So here's the final deck list that I want to talk about. And it's pretty standard. You have your double Pichus, one Oricorio, one Arceus, double Silvallis, and that's kind of your heavy hitter while you're all the while either charging up your Oricorio or charging up your Arceus later in the game. So how I imagine you play this is you could go into an Oricorio or another Silvally. That's another single prize point. And then your final Pokemon would be Arceus, which is worth 2 points, but now you can hit for 130. There is also a single Ilima and double Leafs, because nothing's worse than starting with a Pokemon that you did not want to start with. For example, a type null and you have Pichu, swap in the Pichu, right? Start charging up some things. And then everything else here is a supporter other than the two Pokeballs, which lends to Silvally. But there you guys have it. I'm going to go back to my favorite deck list right over here. The number one deck list, I wouldn't say it's like my favorite, but shout out to you for winning the Xatumi Econ Cup. Sounds weird saying Xatumi since that's me. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys think of this current meta. Also, this might be a new series. Maybe we call it Meta Mondays or something, where I just cover the past week of new decks or potential new meta coverage to get you guys ready for this upcoming week of rank grinding, especially if you're trying to get to that master rank. Again, don't forget to like and hype the video, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.